I'm Nathan, 28 years old, and the day I should remember with pure joy is stained with the empty chairs where my parents should have been. All because I dared to marry before my perfect sister Madison. Their absence spoke volumes about where I stood in our family hierarchy. The pain was raw then. But little did I know that their precious image of the perfect family was about to shatter spectacularly. Sometimes karma works in mysterious ways. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how my parents' perfect facade finally came crumbling down. Growing up in Lakewood Hills, a pristine suburb of Boston with manicured lawns and luxury cars in every driveway, I was always reminded that appearances matter above all else. My parents, Richard and Catherine Wilson, were the quintessential power couple of our community. Dad was a successful corporate lawyer, Mom ran the most exclusive real estate agency in town. And together they crafted an image of flawless family success that was more important to them than actual happiness. And at the center of this carefully constructed image was my older sister, Madison. 2 years my senior, Madison was everything my parents dreamed of having in a child. She graduated top of her class, captained 3 varsity sports teams, won every piano competition she entered, and still found time to volunteer at the local hospital, which made for excellent college application material. Her bedroom was a shrine to achievement. Walls covered with ribbons, trophies lining every shelf, and framed certificates documenting her every accomplishment. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the unofficial family motto. A question that followed me throughout my childhood. When I brought home a B+ in algebra, they'd remind me that Madison never got anything below an A. When I made the basketball team but not as a starter, they pointed out that Madison was team captain by her sophomore year. My achievements existed only in relation to hers, and they were always found wanting. It wasn't that I was a failure by any normal standard. I maintained a solid B average, played decent basketball, and discovered a real talent for graphic design in high school. But in the Wilson household, second place might as well have been last. I remember designing the yearbook cover in junior year, something I was genuinely proud of. When I showed my parents, my father glanced at it and said, "That's nice, but have you finished your calculus homework?" Madison was already taking AP Calculus at your age. As we grew older, the dynamic only solidified. Madison went to Princeton, double majored in economics and political science, and seemed destined for the corporate or political success my parents valued. I chose a state university with a strong arts program, a decision that prompted weeks of arguments about wasting potential and throwing away opportunities. During college, I found my people, fellow creatives who valued expression over accolades, who saw worth in the process rather than just the result. Most importantly, I met Jennifer. We shared a digital media class sophomore year, and her authentic, unpretentious nature drew me in immediately. Jennifer came from a middle-class family in rural Pennsylvania, worked part-time to help pay for college, and possessed a warmth and sincerity I'd never experienced in my status-obsessed home. When I brought Jennifer home for Thanksgiving during our junior year, my parents' disapproval was immediate and barely concealed. They were polite in that cold, New England way that manages to be simultaneously proper and dismissive. My mother asked about Jennifer's family with a tone that suggested she was inquiring about exotic creatures at a zoo. My father barely engaged, asking only what her father did for a living, his interest visibly waning when she explained he was a high school history teacher. "She seems nice," my mother said after Jennifer had gone to bed, in a tone that suggested the exact opposite. "But Nathan, college relationships rarely last. Don't get too serious before you've experienced more of what's out there." Madison, meanwhile, continued her trajectory of perfection. After Princeton came Harvard Law, followed by a position at one of Boston's most prestigious firms. Yet for all her professional success, Madison struggled with relationships. She dated a series of equally accomplished men, but the relationships inevitably collapsed under the weight of two perfectionists trying to maintain flawless facades. Jennifer and I graduated and moved to Philadelphia together. I landed a job at a growing digital marketing agency, while Jennifer began teaching at an elementary school. We built a life filled with genuine friends, meaningful work, and the kind of authentic happiness that can't be displayed on a mantle or listed on a resume. After 4 years together, on a weekend trip to the Pocono Mountains, I proposed by a waterfall, and Jennifer's tearful yes was the happiest moment of my life. When I called my parents with the news, my mother's first response was, "Oh, Nathan, are you sure you're ready? You're still so young in your career." My father added, "Marriage is a serious commitment, son. Jennifer is nice, but you should think about what kind of family you want to build." The subtext was clear. Jennifer wasn't part of the plan they had for me. She didn't come from money, didn't have the right connections, and worst of all, seemed perfectly content without striving for the external markers of success my parents valued. What made the timing particularly tense was that Madison had recently started dating Bradley Thompson, a neurosurgeon from a family almost as status-obsessed as my own. My parents were ecstatic about the match, already envisioning the perfect power couple their daughter would form with this man she'd known for barely 3 months. Jennifer and I wanted to savor our engagement, so we decided on a year-long engagement before the wedding. We envisioned something meaningful but modest, a celebration that reflected our values rather than trying to impress anyone. Jennifer sketched ideas for handmade centerpieces, while I designed our invitations and wedding website. Planning our future together felt like the natural extension of the partnership we'd built over years. My mother had other ideas. The Brunswick Country Club has an 18-month waiting list, but I could call in a favor with Patricia Holloway, she said during a rare call checking in about our plans. And you'll want at least 6 bridesmaids to balance the pictures properly. When I explained that we were thinking of a ceremony at Jennifer's family's small Methodist church in Pennsylvania, followed by a reception at her uncle's renovated barn, the silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Nathan," my mother finally said, her voice tight, "you're a Wilson. People expect a certain standard. Jennifer might be used to simpler affairs, but you need to think about what this says about our family." The tension escalated when we visited my parents for dinner and found that Madison and Bradley had also been invited. Bradley was exactly what you'd expect: tall, conventionally handsome, with the practiced charm of someone who's always been told he's special. Throughout dinner, my parents fawned over Bradley's recent surgical fellowship and his family's vacation home in Martha's Vineyard. Bradley's father and I might play golf next weekend at his club, my father announced proudly, as if being invited to play golf with another rich man was some sort of achievement. Jennifer tried to engage, asking Bradley about his work and showing genuine interest. When the conversation turned to our wedding plans, she enthusiastically described the intimate celebration we were envisioning. "That sounds quaint," Madison said with a thin smile. "Bradley and I were just discussing venues yesterday. The Fairmont Hotel has that gorgeous ballroom with crystal chandeliers." "You're discussing wedding venues after 3 months of dating?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. "When you know, you know," Bradley replied, placing his hand over Madison's in a gesture that seemed more possessive than affectionate. My mother beamed. "Madison has always known what she wants, and the Fairmont would be perfect for a winter wedding." As the weeks passed, Jennifer and I continued with our plans. We found a talented local photographer within our budget, selected a caterer who specialized in farm-to-table cuisine, and decided on a late spring date that would showcase the Pennsylvania countryside at its best. Every decision we made seemed to trigger a barrage of alternative suggestions from my mother. "Wouldn't you prefer roses to wildflowers? They're much more elegant. Are you sure about buffet style? Seated dinners are really the proper way. That photographer mostly does nature shots. Carlton Reed did your cousin Victoria's wedding, and he's shot for Boston Magazine." 6 months into our engagement, Madison called with her Exciting news. Bradley had proposed during a weekend trip to Paris. Despite having dated for barely half a year, they were already planning a wedding that would, in my mother's words, set the standard for the season. What followed was the most uncomfortable brunch of my life. At my parents' insistence, we met Madison and Bradley to discuss wedding plans as a family. As Jennifer and I described our nearly finalized arrangements for a May wedding, my mother kept exchanging glances with Madison. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Son, your mother and I have been thinking. With Madison and Bradley's engagement, it might make sense for you to postpone your wedding a bit." "Postpone? Why would we do that?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Well," my mother jumped in. "Traditionally, the older sibling marries first. And Madison has always dreamed of a spring wedding at the Fairmont. Their earliest availability is next May. The same month as our wedding," I said flatly. "It would be so special if Madison could be married first, as the older sibling," my mother continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "And then perhaps you and Jennifer could have a lovely fall wedding." Jennifer squeezed my hand under the table, her touch grounding me. "We've already put down deposits," I said. "Our date is set. Deposits can be moved." My father waved dismissively. "We'd cover any fees, of course. This isn't about money," I said, feeling heat rise in my face. "This is about respect. Jennifer and I have been together for years. We've been planning our wedding for months. We're not changing our date." "Nathan," Madison interjected, her voice taking on the condescending tone she'd perfected since childhood. "Don't be difficult. Mom and Dad are just trying to maintain family traditions." "What tradition?" I shot back. "The tradition of you always coming first? The tradition of what I want never mattering?" The brunch ended with tense smiles and promises to discuss it later. But my resolve hardened. For the first time in my life, I was standing firm against my family's expectations. Jennifer deserved better than to have our special day treated as an inconvenience to be rescheduled around my sister's whims. The arguments continued over the following weeks. My parents called daily, alternating between guilt trips and thinly veiled threats about reconsidering their contribution to the wedding. Madison sent passive-aggressive texts about family unity and selfishness. Jennifer became increasingly uncomfortable, once asking me tearfully if we should just change our date to keep the peace. "No," I told her, holding her close. "This is our day. We've waited and planned and dreamed about this. We're not giving it up because my sister decided to rush into marriage with a guy she barely knows." The final straw came when Madison texted that she, unfortunately, couldn't be Jennifer's bridesmaid as promised because she was too busy with her own wedding plans. Never mind that our wedding was coming first, or that Jennifer had gone out of her way to include my sister despite their strained relationship. 2 months before our wedding day, my parents requested a family meeting at their house. Jennifer offered to come with me, but I decided to face them alone, hoping to resolve things without subjecting her to more family drama. My parents sat across from me in their formal living room, the setting for so many childhood scoldings and disappointments. The familiar surroundings made me feel like I was 16 again, being reprimanded for a B- on a chemistry test. "Nathan," my father began, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he used in courtrooms, "we've given this situation a lot of thought. Your mother and I have decided that if you insist on keeping your May wedding date, we won't be able to attend. Though I'd half expected this." Hearing the words spoken aloud felt like a physical blow. "You're refusing to come to my wedding? Your own son?" "Don't be dramatic," my mother said sharply. "We're simply asking you to respect family tradition and allow your sister to marry first. Madison is devastated that you're being so stubborn." "Devastated?" I repeated incredulously. "She's known Bradley for 8 months? Jennifer and I have been together for 6 years. This isn't about timeline," my father countered. It's about respecting the proper order of things. The eldest child marries first. That's how it's always been in the Wilson family. I laughed without humor. That's ridiculous. Cousin Ryan married before his older sister Elizabeth. You both attended his wedding. That was different. My mother sniffed. Elizabeth wasn't engaged at the time. The conversation went in circles, with my parents presenting their ultimatum as reasonable while I became increasingly angry. Finally, I stood up. I'm getting married to Jennifer on May 21st, I said firmly. I would like my parents to be there, but that's your choice to make. My father's face hardened. Then you've made your decision. Don't expect us in attendance. The drive home was a blur of hurt and rage. When I arrived at our apartment, Jennifer took one look at my face and wrapped her arms around me without a word. When I finally told her what had happened, she cried with me, apologizing as if any of this were her fault. Maybe we should postpone, she whispered. I don't want to be the reason you lose your family. You are my family, I told her fiercely. You and your parents who have always treated me with kindness, and our friends who support us. If my parents can't be happy for us, that's their loss. The following weeks were some of the hardest of my life. I cycled through anger, grief, disbelief, and back again. Jennifer's parents were outraged on our behalf and doubled down on their support, her father even offering to walk both of us down the aisle. Our friends rallied around us, stepping up to help with last-minute details and providing the emotional support my family should have given. A week before the wedding, I made one last attempt at reconciliation. I drove to my parents' house unannounced, carrying photos of Jennifer in her wedding dress that she'd specifically given permission to share in hopes of changing my parents' minds. My mother answered the door with surprise that quickly turned to wariness. Nathan, we weren't expecting you. I know. Can I come in? Please? They reluctantly let me into the foyer but didn't invite me further into the house, a clear message that I wasn't truly welcome. I showed them the photos of Jennifer, explained how much their presence would mean to us, and promised that we would fully support Madison's wedding when her time came. My father shook his head. Son, you're being selfish. Family traditions matter. Your sister has always followed the rules, excelled at everything she's done. For once, you should consider someone besides yourself. This is about my wedding day, I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay calm. How is wanting my parents there selfish? My mother sighed dramatically. The truth is, Nathan, we've already committed to Madison's plans. The Fairmont had a cancellation for May 21st, and with Bradley's hospital schedule, it was the only date that worked for them this year. The deposits have been paid. Invitations are being printed. The truth hit me like a tidal wave. You booked their wedding on the same day as mine? Knowing we'd set our date months ago. We assumed you'd do the right thing and postpone. My father said stiffly. Madison is the eldest, and her match with Bradley is, well, it's the kind of connection that benefits the entire family. In that moment, I saw my family with complete clarity for the first time. My happiness had never been the priority. I was simply expected to fall in line with their plans, to accommodate their vision of the perfect family narrative even at the expense of my own joy. I left without another word. The photos of Jennifer still clutched in my hand. On the drive home, I called Madison, hoping against hope that my sister might show more compassion than our parents. You knew, I said when she answered. You knew they booked your wedding on my date, and you went along with it. Don't be dramatic, Nathan, she replied, sounding exactly like our mother. You could have changed your date at any time. You chose to be difficult. I'm your brother, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Doesn't that mean anything to you? The pause before she answered told me everything I needed to know. Family means following traditions, Nathan. You've always insisted on doing things your own way. I hung up, finally accepting that the family I'd spent my life trying to please would never put my happiness on equal footing with Madison's. It was time to create a new definition of family with Jennifer and the people who truly cared about us. May 21st dawned clear and perfect. As if the universe were offering a small consolation for the family absence that hung over the day. Jennifer's uncle's barn had been transformed with twinkling lights, wildflower arrangements, and long tables for the family-style dinner we'd planned. Everything was exactly as we'd envisioned, except for the two conspicuously empty chairs in the front row. Jennifer looked radiant in her lace gown, her dark hair crowned with a wreath of baby's breath and lavender. Her father, a kind man who had welcomed me from our first meeting, proudly walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Jennifer's mother had helped me with my tie that morning, straightening it with the gentle touch of a woman who understood that I needed a mother's care that day. "You're our son now, too," she had said simply, and those words had nearly undone me. During the ceremony, I found myself scanning the small crowd more than once, some irrational part of me still hoping my parents might appear at the last minute. They didn't, of course. Neither did Madison. My side of the family was represented only by a single cousin who had defied my parents' unofficial boycott, and my elderly grandmother who had insisted on coming despite my mother's disapproval. "I've never missed a grandchild's wedding and I'm not starting now," she declared when I called to tell her she didn't need to make the journey. She sat in the front row, her aged hands clasping mine before the ceremony began. "They're wrong, Nathan," she whispered fiercely, "and someday they'll realize it." Despite the absences, or perhaps because of the intentional community we'd gathered, the day was filled with genuine joy. Jennifer's large extended family embraced me completely. Our college friends gave heartfelt toasts. My colleagues from the marketing agency had created a surprise video montage of well-wishes that made both of us cry happy tears. We danced until midnight under the stars, surrounded by people who loved us for exactly who we were, not for some idealized version of what we should be. When Jennifer tossed her bouquet, it was caught by my grandmother, who cackled with delight and announced she was back on the market. Our honeymoon in Costa Rica was a blessed escape from the family drama. For 2 weeks, we hiked through rainforests, lounged on beaches, and began processing everything that had happened. I fluctuated between anger at my parents and deep sadness, sometimes waking in the night with a heaviness in my chest that only Jennifer's presence could ease. "They're missing out on knowing the amazing man you are," Jennifer told me one night as we watched the sunset from our balcony. "That's their loss, not yours." When we returned home, I sent a carefully curated selection of wedding photos to my parents and Madison. Beautiful shots of our first dance, the ceremony, Jennifer's father giving his toast. I included a brief note. "We missed having you there. It was a beautiful day full of love." No response came. Not from my parents, not from Madison. The silence continued through the summer. I received a formal birthday card from my parents in July, signed, "Love, Mom and Dad," in my mother's perfect handwriting, without any personal message. Madison sent a text, "Happy birthday. Hope you're well." It was as if I'd become a distant acquaintance rather than a son and brother. Meanwhile, Jennifer and I settled into married life. We moved to a larger apartment, adopted a rescue dog named Charlie, and began saving for a house in the suburbs. Jennifer was promoted to lead teacher at her school, while I took on more responsibility at the agency, managing our largest client accounts. We built holiday traditions with Jennifer's family and our circle of friends, creating the warm, authentic connection I'd always craved. As Madison's wedding approached in the fall, I debated whether to attend. The formal invitation arrived in September, addressed only to me, with no mention of Jennifer. The exclusion of my wife was the final confirmation that I couldn't subject either of us to that environment. I sent my regrets with a gift from their registry, an expensive set of crystal wine glasses that I knew would please my mother's sense of propriety. Madison called, asking in a strained voice if I would reconsider. "It would mean a lot to have my brother there," she said, sounding more vulnerable than I'd heard her in years. Did you fight for Jennifer to be invited? I asked directly. Her silence was answer enough. I can't come to a wedding where my wife isn't welcome, I said gently. I hope you understand that. Mom and Dad are still upset about how everything happened. She offered weakly. I know. And I'm still hurt that none of you came to my wedding. I think we all need more time. She didn't argue further, and we ended the call with awkward well wishes. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, but it changed nothing. Madison's wedding would proceed without me, just as mine had gone forward without my family. 1 year after my wedding, Madison's big day finally arrived. Though I wasn't present, I heard all about it through mutual friends and social media. What should have been the crowning achievement of my parents' social aspirations turned into a spectacular disaster that exposed the cracks in their perfect family facade. The ceremony at the Fairmont Hotel was exactly the elaborate affair my mother had envisioned, with 6 bridesmaids in designer gowns, a string quartet, and flower arrangements that cost more than our entire wedding. The guest list included judges, politicians, and Boston society figures my parents had spent decades cultivating relationships with. But the reception was where things fell apart. According to my cousin Lisa, who called me the next day bursting with details, Bradley got progressively drunker throughout the evening. By the time the main course was served, he was visibly intoxicated, slurring his words during his speech and making inappropriate jokes about finally getting Madison into bed legally. My father, mortified by Bradley's behavior, attempted to cut the microphone, leading to a scuffle that several guests recorded on their phones. Meanwhile, Madison had retreated to the bridal suite in tears after Bradley had snapped at her for nagging when she suggested he switch to water. The situation deteriorated further when Bradley's father, equally intoxicated, began loudly complaining about the cost of the wedding. $50,000 for flowers? Highway robbery, and Richard just bent over and took it. He bellowed within earshot of my mother's garden club friends. By midnight, what should have been a sophisticated affair had devolved into chaos. Madison had emerged from hiding only to have a public meltdown when she discovered the wedding cake had been served before they could do the formal cutting. According to Lisa, my sister screamed at the catering manager until she was hoarse, while my mother tried desperately to usher concerned guests toward the dance floor. It was like watching the Titanic hit the iceberg in slow motion, Lisa told me with undisguised glee. Aunt Catherine kept saying everything was fine while Madison was sobbing in the corner and Bradley was passing out at the head table. Videos of the event circulated among family members despite my parents' attempts to contain the damage. I watched with a complex mix of emotions, sympathy for my sister, vindication that the perfect wedding had imploded, and a strange sadness that I couldn't entirely explain. The aftermath was even more revealing. Bradley and Madison returned from their honeymoon in the Maldives to move into the luxury condo my parents had helped them purchase as a wedding gift. Within weeks, cracks in their relationship became apparent. Bradley, it turned out, had very traditional expectations for marriage. Despite Madison's prestigious legal career, he assumed she would take his name professionally, handle all domestic responsibilities, and start trying for children immediately. When Madison pushed back, insisting on maintaining her identity and career, Bradley revealed the controlling personality that had been carefully concealed during their whirlwind courtship. He actually told her that his mother managed to keep a perfect home while raising 3 children, so why couldn't she? My cousin reported during one of our now regular phone calls. And your dad sided with Bradley, said Madison should be focusing on giving them grandchildren. Madison, raised to achieve perfection in all things, found herself trapped in a marriage where her accomplishments were suddenly devalued. The golden child status that had defined her existence was undermined by her husband's expectation that she become a glorified housekeeper and Bradley's arm candy at hospital functions. 3 months after their wedding, Madison called me out of the blue. It was nearly midnight, and I answered with alarm, fearing bad news. Nathan? Her voice was thick with tears. I'm sorry to call so late. What's wrong? I asked, instantly alert. Bradley and I had a huge fight. He threw my briefcase across the room when I told him I needed to work this weekend. He said I was choosing my career over our marriage. Despite everything that had happened between us, my protective instincts kicked in. Are you safe? Do you need somewhere to go? She laughed bitterly. I'm sitting in my car in the parking garage. I can't go to Mom and Dad's. They'll just tell me to apologize to him and be a better wife. Come to our place, I said without hesitation. Jennifer won't mind. There was a long pause. After how I treated Jennifer? She should hate me. She doesn't hate anyone, I said truthfully. That's not who she is. 2 hours later, Madison sat at our kitchen table while Jennifer made tea and set out cookies. My wife treated my sister with kindness she hadn't earned, asking gentle questions and offering comfort without judgment. Madison, stripped of her usual confidence and polish, finally saw what I'd found in Jennifer all along. I've been so unhappy, Madison confessed, cradling her mug. Everyone thinks my life is perfect, but it's all just for show. Bradley only cares about how I make him look to his colleagues. Mom and Dad only care about how our marriage looks to their friends. What do you want? Jennifer asked simply. Madison looked startled, as if no one had ever asked her that question before. Perhaps no one had. I don't know, she whispered. I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone else wanted. I don't even know who I am without that. She didn't leave Bradley that night. But something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, Madison saw the cost of the perfectionism our parents had instilled in her. She began therapy the following week, tentatively exploring who she might be outside of others' expectations. We began meeting for coffee every few weeks, rebuilding a sibling relationship that had been buried under years of competition and resentment. Madison started sharing things she'd never admitted before. The panic attacks she'd hidden throughout college, the exhaustion of maintaining her flawless image, the envy she'd sometimes felt watching me forge my own path. You were always braver than me, she told me during one of our meetups. I was too scared to disappoint them. 6 months after her wedding, Madison's marriage was clearly failing. Bradley's controlling behavior had escalated to checking her phone and criticizing her appearance. The final blow came when Madison discovered he was having an affair with a nurse at his hospital. Something he barely bothered to deny when confronted. He said I was too focused on work to keep him satisfied, Madison told me, her voice hollow. Mom asked what I did to push him away. In that moment, I realized that our parents' obsession with appearances had damaged both their children, just in different ways. I had escaped the golden child trap, but had lost my family in the process. Madison had received their approval, but at the cost of her authentic self. When Jennifer and I discovered we were expecting a baby, sharing the news with her family was pure joy. Her parents cried happy tears, her siblings immediately started planning the baby shower, and her grandmother began knitting a blanket that very day. Telling my family was a different experience entirely. I called my parents with the news, expecting that a grandchild might finally bridge the growing divide between us. That's wonderful news, Nathan, my mother said after a pause that lasted a beat too long. We're very happy for you both. Her tone was pleasant but distant, as if I'd announced a promotion at work rather than the upcoming birth of her first grandchild. My father offered similarly detached congratulations before asking about my job, clearly more comfortable discussing my career than my growing family. Madison, however, was genuinely excited. I'm going to be an aunt, she exclaimed when I told her. Can I help with the nursery? I've been reading about non-toxic paints. Her enthusiasm surprised and touched me. After several months of cautious reconnection, this felt like a true step toward healing our relationship. During one of our coffee meetings, she hesitantly asked if I would consider a family dinner with our parents. They miss you, Nathan, even if they don't know how to show it, she said. And I think we all need to talk. Really talk, not just pretend everything's fine. I was skeptical. The last time I saw them, they made it pretty clear where I stand in their priorities. Things are different now, Madison insisted. After everything with Bradley. I've been talking to them. Trying to make them see how their expectations affected us. After discussing it with Jennifer, who was now 5 months pregnant, I agreed to a dinner at my parents' house. Jennifer insisted on coming despite my concerns about stress during her pregnancy. We're a team, she said firmly. And they need to see us as a family. The evening began with the awkward formality that characterized most Wilson family gatherings. My mother had prepared an elaborate meal, the table set with her best china as if good silverware could paper over 2 years of estrangement. My father made stilted small talk about the stock market, while Madison shot me encouraging glances across the table. Jennifer, bless her, navigated the tension with grace, answering my mother's polite questions about the pregnancy and complimenting the food. When she mentioned that her mother was planning to stay with us for a few weeks after the baby arrived, I saw my mother flinch slightly. That's thoughtful of her, my mother said carefully. Though a new mother usually wants privacy. I hired a night nurse for Madison when she was born. Jennifer's mom is amazing with babies, I said. She raised 5 kids and has 7 grandchildren already. We're lucky to have her help. An uncomfortable silence fell. Madison jumped in with questions about the nursery, and the conversation limped along until dessert was served. It was during coffee that everything finally erupted. My mother, who had been eyeing Jennifer's baby bump throughout dinner, suddenly said, I do hope you'll consider the Wilson family christening gown. It dates back 4 generations. Before I could respond, she added, Of course, you'll want to have the christening at St. Mark's. We can speak with Reverend Phillips about dates. Jennifer and I exchanged glances. We had already discussed raising our child with exposure to both her Methodist background and my more secular upbringing, allowing them to make their own decisions about faith when they were older. Actually, Mom, I said carefully, we're still figuring out our approach to religious traditions. Jennifer's family has their own meaningful customs too. My mother's smile tightened. Nathan, some traditions aren't optional. The Wilson christening is one of them. Catherine, my father warned quietly, but she pressed on. First you insist on that rustic wedding instead of something appropriate for your standing, and now you're going to deny your child their heritage? Jennifer may not understand the importance of these things, but you should know better. The dismissive way she referred to Jennifer, sitting right there at the table, ignited something in me. Years of suppressed resentment and hurt came rushing to the surface. That's enough, I said, my voice low but firm. You don't get to disappear from our lives for 2 years and then dictate how we raise our child. We didn't disappear, my father objected. You chose to proceed with your wedding against our wishes. Against your wishes? I repeated incredulously. You gave me an ultimatum because Madison needed to be first, as always. You booked her wedding for the same day as mine, knowing our date was set. How was that a choice? Don't be dramatic. My mother snapped. Family traditions matter. No, Mom. Status matters to you. Appearances matter. Madison and I were just props in your perfect family narrative. My father's face darkened. That's enough, Nathan. You've always had a flair for exaggeration. Have I? I challenged. Then explain why you couldn't attend my wedding but help Madison plan an extravagant disaster with a man she barely knew. Don't bring my wedding into this. Madison interjected, but there was no heat in her words. Your wedding is exactly the point. I continued. The perfect daughter marrying the perfect doctor in the perfect venue. Except it was all facade, wasn't it? Bradley turned out to be a cheating, controlling alcoholic. The wedding was a humiliating spectacle. But at least you maintained the appearance of tradition. You have no right to speak about Madison's marriage, my father thundered. To everyone's surprise, Madison spoke up. He's right, Dad. The room went silent. My sister straightened her shoulders and continued. You and Mom pushed me into a marriage that looked good on paper. You encouraged me to ignore red flags because Bradley came from the right family and had the right career. Nathan tried to warn me that I was rushing things. But I was too busy trying to please you to listen. My mother looked stricken. Madison, that's not fair. We only wanted what was best for you. No, Madison said quietly. You wanted what looked best to your friends. There's a difference. Jennifer reached over and squeezed my hand as years of family dynamics played out at the dinner table. Madison described the pressure she'd felt throughout her life to maintain perfection, the panic attacks she'd hidden, the constant fear of disappointing our parents. I was so jealous of Nathan, she admitted. He found the courage to live authentically, to choose love over status. I was too afraid. My father, visibly uncomfortable with this display of emotion, attempted to redirect the conversation. This is all very dramatic. Perhaps we should discuss this another time when everyone is calmer. That's your solution to everything, isn't it, Dad? I said. Postpone the uncomfortable conversations, pretend the problems don't exist, maintain the appearance of harmony at all costs. We gave you every advantage, he replied stiffly. Both of you. The best schools, the best opportunities. We wanted you to succeed. But success on whose terms? Jennifer asked softly, speaking up for the first time in the debate. Nathan is successful. He's respected in his field, financially stable, and most importantly, happy. Isn't that what parents ultimately want for their children? My mother looked at Jennifer as if truly seeing her for the first time. You don't understand our family values. I understand that your values nearly cost you your relationship with your son. Jennifer replied, her hand protectively covering her belly. And now they might cost you a relationship with your grandchild too. The raw truth of her words hung in the air. My mother's eyes filled with tears, though whether from anger or realization, I couldn't tell. My father stared down at his empty coffee cup, his usual confidence shaken. Madison reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, Nathan. For everything. For not standing up for you and Jennifer. For going along with their plans even when I knew they were wrong. Her public apology, something unprecedented in our family, broke something open. For the first time. We were having an honest conversation about the damage done by our parents' perfectionism and status obsession. I'm not asking you to change who you are overnight, I told my parents. But if you want to be part of our lives, part of your grandchild's life, something has to change. We need respect, not just tolerance. Acceptance, not just politeness. My father nodded slowly, though he said nothing. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. We should go, I said to Jennifer, who nodded in agreement. As we stood to leave, Madison hugged us both, whispering, I'll call you tomorrow, in my ear. At the door, my father surprised me by placing his hand on my shoulder. This isn't easy for us, he said gruffly. But we'll think about what you said. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Richard Wilson, it was an unprecedented concession. As Jennifer and I drove home, I felt both drained and somehow lighter. As if a burden I'd carried for years had begun to shift. 6 months later, our son James entered the world after 23 hours of labor. Jennifer was magnificent throughout. Stronger and more determined than I'd ever seen her. When the doctor placed our red-faced, squalling boy on Jennifer's chest, the look of wonder and love on her face made every family struggle fade into insignificance. Jennifer's mother arrived the next day, bringing homemade meals, practical advice, and the calm competence of a woman who had raised 5 children of her own. Our small apartment was filled with visitors from Jennifer's large family, each bringing gifts, offers of help, and the genuine joy that comes from people who understand that family means showing up. To my surprise, Madison was among the first visitors, arriving with an enormous teddy bear and tears in her eyes when she held James for the first time. "He has your eyes," she told me, gently rocking him. "And hopefully your artistic talent instead of my neurotic perfectionism." Her self-deprecating humor was new, one of many changes that had emerged as she rebuilt her life after divorcing Bradley. She had moved to a smaller apartment, started focusing on environmental law rather than corporate cases, and begun dating a kind, low-key high school teacher who looked at her like she hung the moon. My parents' evolution was slower and more tentative. They sent an extravagant gift basket to the hospital but didn't visit until James was 2 weeks old. When they finally came to our apartment, the atmosphere was strained but not hostile. My mother had clearly dressed for the occasion in what she considered appropriately casual clothes, though she still wore pearls and full makeup to hold the newborn. "He's beautiful," she said softly, cradling James with more tenderness than I'd expected. "He has the Wilson chin." My father stood awkwardly by the window until I placed James in his arms. The sight of my stern, status-conscious father whispering nonsense to a baby who promptly spit up on his designer tie was an image I'll never forget. The real turning point came 3 months after James was born. My father had a minor heart attack, a warning sign that the high-stress, appearance-focused life he'd built was taking a physical toll. During his recovery, I visited him in the hospital without Jennifer and James, wanting a chance to speak honestly. I found him looking smaller somehow in the hospital bed, the veneer of invincibility stripped away by a hospital gown and monitoring wires. "The doctor says I need to reduce stress," he told me, attempting his usual dismissive tone but failing. "Apparently decades of 60-hour work weeks aren't recommended." "Shocking," I replied with a small smile. We sat in silence for a moment before he spoke again, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Your mother and we thought we were doing the right thing, pushing you both to excel, maintaining certain standards. We wanted to give you advantages we didn't have." "I know, Dad. But seeing you with James," he continued, "I've been thinking about what really matters. When the doctor was running tests, all I could think about was that I might not see my grandson grow up." He reached for my hand, an unprecedented gesture from a man who rarely showed physical affection. "I'm sorry, Nathan. For missing your wedding. For not being the father you deserved." The simple apology, delivered without qualifications or excuses, was more healing than I could have imagined. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot. I'd like to do better," he continued. "Be the grandfather to James that I should have been the father to you." Over the following months, my father made good on his word. He retired from his law firm, despite my mother's initial protests about what people would think. He began showing up at our apartment regularly, sometimes just to sit and hold James while Jennifer and I took a much-needed nap. My mother's transformation was more complicated. Old habits of judgment and status consciousness would occasionally slip out, like when she questioned our decision to enroll James in a cooperative daycare rather than the exclusive preschool where Madison and I had gone. "But the Arlington Academy has a waiting list 3 years long," she protested. "We still know people on the board who could help." "Mom," I said patiently, "James is 6 months old. He needs loving care and attention, not a prestigious preschool. The co-op is full of engaged parents and experienced caregivers. But think about his future connections, the foundation for his education." Jennifer, who had developed remarkable patience with my mother, stepped in. "Catherine, we value your input, but this is our decision. We're raising James to prioritize kindness and authenticity over status and connections." To my surprise, my mother didn't argue further. Later, I overheard her telling a friend on the phone that James was attending a progressive early childhood program with an innovative parent involvement component, somehow spinning our choice into something that sounded exclusive and impressive. Some habits die hard, I suppose, but she was trying in her own way. As James approached his first birthday, our family had reached a new equilibrium. Not perfect, not without occasional tensions, but fundamentally changed from the rigid hierarchy of my childhood. Madison had become one of Jennifer's closest friends, an aunt who spoiled James shamelessly and often crashed on our couch after late-night baby dance parties. My parents visited weekly, gradually learning to respect our parenting decisions even when they differed from their own values. My father became surprisingly adept at baby care, his former focus on appearance giving way to a willingness to get down on the floor and make ridiculous faces if it made James laugh. One evening, as I rocked James to sleep, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The pain of my parents' absence at my wedding had been real and deep, but it had also been the catalyst for breaking unhealthy family patterns that might otherwise have continued for another generation. Looking down at my son's peaceful face, I made a silent promise. I would never make him feel that he had to earn my love through achievement. I would celebrate his uniqueness rather than comparing him to others. I would teach him that true success comes from authentic connection, not social status or material wealth. James would grow up knowing that he was valued simply for being himself. That mistakes were opportunities for growth rather than shameful failures, that vulnerability was strength rather than weakness. The toxic perfectionism that had damaged both Madison and me would end with our generation. As I placed my sleeping son in his crib, I felt a profound sense of peace. The path to healing our family had been difficult and painful, but ultimately worth every step. Sometimes the most beautiful things emerge from broken places, and the most valuable family traditions are the ones we consciously choose to create. Have you ever had to stand your ground against family pressure to do what you knew was right? Or experienced the painful process of setting boundaries with loved ones? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose your own path, even when it disappoints others. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the families we build are more important than the ones we're born into.